This weekend, UFC 301 is taking place with Alexandre Pantoja taking on Steven Erceg for the Flyweight Championship. And in this video, I'll be giving you my full breakdown and prediction for every single fight on the card, starting with Alessandro Costa versus Kevin Borjas. Now, when we look at Costa, he's very aggressive. We saw that in his fight against Steve Erceg. He likes to kind of explode into his submissions. He's a BJJ black belt, and he's got the KO power as well, but he's not very technical on the feet. And then when we look at the other side, when we look at Borjas, he has the KO power as well. He's 8-0 with KO TKOs, and he's got very tight boxing. He uses more of like a sniper style, basically staying on the feet, moving along the outside, and picking apart his opponent with the jab. But when we look at the submission specifically, Costa definitely has that ground game advantage, but then Borjas is the cleaner striker. So it's very much ground game versus on the feet. And when we look at Borjas in terms of being threatened by submissions, he's only ever been finished once. So it was on the regional scene, a guy against a guy named Renzo Mendes in 2019. He got finished by a rear naked choke, but he got hit by a flush head kick beforehand, which led to it. And I think that honestly, he needs, especially in this matchup, he needs to get properly dropped to get finished. And I don't think Costa has the tools in comparison to Borjas on the feet to get it to that point. I don't think he will actually be able to drop Borjas. I think that Borjas is just a little bit too technically sound for him. When it comes to Costa getting it to the ground, which I think he needs to do unless he can land a lucky strike, he has a very poor takedown accuracy, 16% takedown accuracy, and he needs to get that fight to the ground, as I said. Especially when it comes to the feet, he's pretty chinny. I mean, we look at him against Steve Erceg and a couple of his other fights beforehand. Against Steve Erceg, though, I mean, he was rocked about 3 or 4 times just by, honestly, a couple 1-2s, hooked here and there. But he was getting tagged badly as the fight went on. And, I mean, we can't not mention that he got finished by Albazi as well, which Albazi is very good, but he's primarily a wrestler. So I think that Borjas is honestly too technically sound on the feet. He's going to give Costa trouble, and I think he's going to get that round 2 TKO finish. Moving up, Ismael Bonfim versus Vince Pichel. Now, when it comes to Bonfim, good strike defense and good takedown defense for him, and he definitely has the overall speed advantage. I mean, they've got a 13-year age difference, and Pichel's pretty much past his prime, we've got to be honest. And, I mean, both are KO artists, and, like, Pichel, he does have the capability there, but Bonfim's never been finished on the feet, and Bonfim's also on the rise. I mean, Bonfim has beaten everyone in the last 10 years of his fighting career, except for Benoit Saint-Denis. I mean, we've seen what Benoit Saint-Denis can do, aside from Poirier. But aside from that, yeah, I mean, he's fought some decent opposition, and he had a lot of momentum. And I mean, Benoit Saint-Denis and Vince Pichel are not the same fighters. And we look at him fighting Terrence McKinney. I would honestly say Terrence McKinney's better than Vince Pichel. So I do think that this is going to lean a lot more in Bonfim's favor. And Pichel also lost to Marco Madsen, who I just don't think is that good. Vince does have a decent chin, but Bonfim is going to find confidence with his combinations. Once he sees that strike speed difference between the two of them, I think he's just going to overrun the show. I think that he will be able to tag Pichel enough to drop him, and then I think he's going to secure that round 3 submission. Next up, Dione Barboza versus Ernesta Karatskeita. Now, when it comes to that surname, I tried not to butcher it, but I mean, I probably did. When we look at Ernesta, though, she has had a more successful career on the regional scene. She's in the French regional scene. She won a title at Hexagon MMA, whereas Barboza, she's had an alright time on the regional scene, hasn't won a title or anything, but she does have a decent ground game. On the Contender Series against Guerrero, she showed nice transitions, nice butterfly sweeps as well. but wasn't too impressed on the feet with her, to be honest. And when we look at Ernesta, she's primarily more of a striking stylist. She has a 5-inch reach advantage in this fight as well. In her Contender Series fight against Giudice, she used so much forward pressure, had ridiculous volume. She landed over 200 significant strikes in that fight. And she just was a zombie. She just kept moving forward. But I will admit, when it came to that fight, it doesn't seem like she has a lot of power there. So I will say, I think that she's able to outland Barboza quite effectively. She has the better resume overall. There's not much to go off with them realistically, but I think just basing off what we've seen so far, I'm going to give Ernesta the unanimous decision victory here. Next up, Maurizio Hufi. Looks like Ruffy, but I think it's Hufi. He is versing Jamie Mullarkey. Now, when we look at Hufi, he's from a good camp. He's from the Fighting Nerds, so same camp as KO Baralho and Gene Silva, who are on absolute tears in their careers at the moment, and that are both fighting on this card, so we'll get to their fights as well. But when we look at Hufi in particular, very good spinning kicks, and he has a very nice right hand. We saw that in his Contender Series fight. He uses a bladed stance a lot like Conor McGregor, so he's very, very versatile with his striking. His stance allows him to go in and out very quickly, and he definitely has KO power. That is for sure. Now, when we look at Mullarkey, he definitely has the experience advantage to his name, but his chin has definitely been failing him recently. He hasn't got any momentum on his side, and he got KO'd by Naimov, Nasrat Haqparast, and also at UFC 293. I mean, I was at the event. I wasn't watching it on the screen. In all honesty, even just seeing it in person, I think he was getting pieced up by Makdessi. I honestly think he lost that fight at least 29-28. I think I won't lie, I think there was a bit of Australian bias in that fight. But Hufi does keep his hands low, which can create some opportunity possibly for Mullarkey. But then also with Hufi, he has very good reflexes, and his stamina did not wane at all in his Contender Series fight. He also showed great takedown defense on the regional scene as well in a couple of his later fights. I mean, he's very well-rounded and has pretty slick striking, which, especially with that takedown defense, he is pretty much nullifying Jamie Mullarkey's best option there. I think Jamie Mullarkey's best option is definitely getting it to the ground and trying to find some submission. I just don't think Mullarkey's going to be able to utilize that. So I think that if Mullarkey can't forward pressure effectively and finish Hufi or get him to the ground, then I honestly think Hufi is going to get this by a round 2 KO. Moving along, Joaquim Silva versus Drakkar Klose. Now, both are very similar in age. Drakkar's 36, Silva's 35, and both of them have been out for the exact same amount of time. So they've been out since the Dariush versus Sarukian fight night last year in December. But looking at form, Drakkar is on a 3-fight win streak at the moment, since he got finished by Dariush. And Silva, in his last 5 fights, he's lost 3 by KO. But when we look at Silva, he does have the superior ground game out of the two of them, and he needs to somehow get a takedown and get that submission finish, because I just don't like his chances on the feet, especially with how chinny he is now. The issue with that is Klose does have a pretty good takedown defense, but probably the worst part for Silva is that he has a 55% striking accuracy, and he has KO power as well. I honestly think Silva's chin is expired, and I think Drakkar's in form. It's pretty easy to say. I think he's going to get the round 2 TKO on this one. Moving up to Gene Silva versus William Gomis. Now, this one's a tricky one, I reckon. I reckon this is probably one of the trickiest ones on the prelims. Now, Silva is on a 9-fight win streak, so he's one of the ones from Fighting Nerds that I said before. He destroyed Weston Wilson with his striking accuracy. He was very composed in that fight. And one of the things that I noticed that was probably best about his game is he has a very nasty lead left hook and very good takedown defense as well. Now, these guys are opposite stances. So there is a good possibility for Gene Silva to counter with that lead left hook if he can land it properly on Gomis. But the thing with Gomis is that he is an extremely technical striker. I think he's more like Silva is composed, but I think in terms of technical capabilities, Gomis is more advanced than Silva. Gomis is on a 12-fight win streak with a 4-inch reach advantage going into this fight, which is a massive advantage going into this matchup stylistically. Gomis is extremely good defensively with his striking as well, and he only absorbs about a strike and a half a minute along with that 81% takedown defense. So he's very technically and defensively sound as a fighter. I do think it'll be extremely competitive though, hence the pick'em odds, but I'm going to edge Gomis to go 29-28 with him finding most of his success in the second and third rounds. I think he might get caught early in the first round with Gene's speed. And I think with his form of counters as well, I think Williams gonna have to will take at least a round to kind of get his reads on how Silva's gonna fight, especially on the feet. And I think he can land a bit there. And I think Silva can possibly take that first round, but I just see Gomis taking over the fight in the second and third. Now moving up to the hype trains, we got Elvis Brener versus Myktabek Orolbai. Now, both of them are very exciting fighters at the moment. Brener has definitely proved himself recently. I mean, he's been underdog at least 2 out of the 3 times, and that being pretty heavy underdogs as well. He KO'd Guram Kutateladze as a plus 500 underdog. He showed amazing cardio and an insane chin in that fight as well. Kutateladze was lighting him up in the first and the second round. And then we look at Orolbai, and he completely nullified Uros Medic, who had an amazing uppercut KO last weekend against Tim Means, which we analyzed in the recap video. If you haven't seen that already for that fight night, go check it out. But overall, both are very well-rounded fighters. Elvis has more UFC experience than Myktabek Orolbai, and he has very good stamina. He trains with Charles Oliveira as well, which, I mean, I would definitely say probably helped him with being 11-0 in his submissions. However, when it comes to his striking, he does absorb a lot. He absorbs a lot of strikes, and I mean, that's been shown in his recent UFC fights, but he has that chin to back it up. He was about 2 strikes away, honestly, from getting finished by Guram Kutateladze in round 1, though. And when we look in that striking department, Orolbai has a 2-inch reach advantage and a very good chin. He took some shots from Uros Medic, and Uros Medic, as we know, is a absolute bulldozing KO artist. One of the biggest cruxes, though, I think, for Elvis is that Orolbai is more advanced in offensive wrestling. I think that is where Orolbai can have his best opportunity to drag out the fight, but he needs to be careful when he is in top control. Similar to what I said about Arman versus Charles, he just needs to be very careful in that top control, as Elvis has a very, very good guard. He's landed 8 submissions overall with 2 triangles and 6 arm bars. So yeah, Elvis's best opportunity is definitely landing a submission, especially off his back. He's just lethal from there. But that being said, though, I think that Orolbai has that awareness on the ground to keep himself safe. And I think that he can keep Brener on the back foot as well. When Brener gets backed up against the cage, that is when he is at his weakest. I think that also with Orolbai cutting down to lightweight, I mean, we've seen from his resume beforehand, every fight that he has had at lightweight, he has finished in round 1. So he definitely has that momentum within that division especially. It's going to be one of the most exciting fights on the card for sure. But I think that Orolbai will get a 29-28 decision, taking the first 2 rounds. And then I think that Elvis's cardio will be able to take over and steal the last round. But that being said, I think it'll be too late for Elvis Brener to get that win. Moving up, Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Yasmin Lucindo. The freaking last names in this fight card are just ridiculous. A big fight for both of them. I mean, Lucindo would be able to enter into the rankings from this, and then Karolina would I mean, it would put her up to a 5-fight win streak at 38 years old. So that, I think, definitely warrants her getting back in for a top 10 fight if she does win this. If she does win this matchup. And then when we look at Karolina specifically, very good cardio, high volume Muay Thai fighter, and has pretty decent clinch work as well. And she obviously has the experience level on her side. She fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk for the title at one point. She fared pretty well in that fight. She did lose, I believe it was 49-46, but her pace just didn't wane at all. And I think that's what Yasmin needs to be careful of in terms of she hasn't had that much experience overall, and especially fighting someone that is so volume or heavy. It'll be interesting to see how Yasmin Lucindo's cardio fares in the fight if Karolina is able to dictate the pace. But I think that Lucindo over Karolina has the power and the speed advantage, and she does have a good submission game as well. So again, she's another fighter on this card that wants to get it to the ground. She also showed pretty nice counter striking as well. She showed a nice check hook against Polyana Viana, and Karolina does not have great head movement. She's very good at movement, but not great head movement. And when we look at it, 16-year age difference as well. So it's that experience versus athleticism fight. And I think that Karolina will be able to outstrike Lucindo consistently, but I think the power shots will be able to steal Lucindo a decision 29-28. Similar to the last fight that we analysed, I think Karolina will be able to steal that last round just out of cardio basis, just like Brenner probably could. But I think it'll be too little too late, and I think Lucindo will be able to get that 29-28 win just based off her power. Moving on to the feature prelim, Jack Shore versus Joanderson Brito. Now, when we look at Jack Shore, he's just moved up to featherweight after fighting Amir Khani in his last fight. And even though he got the submission win, Amir Khani was dominant, especially in that first round, until he got hurt in the second round. And a big tell from that fight with Jack Shore at featherweight is his strength. I don't think he is very strong at featherweight. And a huge issue in this matchup is Joanderson Brito. One of his best traits, one of his best strength is literally his strength. So I think that Jack Shore will definitely struggle in this fight. Granted, he defends very well overall. He has very clean boxing, which is partly in the way that he got Amir Khani out of there. But I think against someone like Brito, who I think is much stronger than Jack Shore, Brito is the natural featherweight. And I think it's going to be especially a issue for him because Brito is quite a forward pressure fighter, and he utilizes that strength to then bully his opponents. He even was able to do that against Jonathan Pearce, who Jonathan Pearce himself is an aggressive wrestler. That being said, though, with his pressure, Brito needs to make sure he doesn't overcommit to his strikes, as in that Jonathan Pearce fight, we saw him overcommit and he lost positions. And he almost had himself in a lot of trouble in those fights when he tried to take Pearce's back, I believe, in the first round, and he flung straight over the top of his back, and then Pearce got top control. So it's something that he definitely needs to be wary of, especially with Jack Shore, who does have a pretty good submission game himself. He's 9-1 in the submission game. And even though if Shore is able to gain that top control even off a mistake, he needs to be very aware of the guillotine. We know Brito is a guillotine machine, and we saw what he did against Pearce. Pearce is a defensively aware wrestler as well, and then, it didn't stop Brito from securing that ninja choke. I think Brito could get a first round finish though, but as I said, Shore is very good defensively. He does have very good striking defense, good fundamentals, and he has an 80% takedown defense. So I think after he gets tested with some big shots from Brito with that strength and that pressure, just bullying him a bit, I think that Brito can hurt him to the point where I think he can secure the rear naked choke win in round 2 after dropping Shore. Now onto the main card. Paul Craig versus Caio Borralho. Now, when it comes to Borralho, bladed stance, very similar to Hoofy. So it allows him to pop in and out very quick, where when we look at Craig isn't that confident a striker, and especially with that non-confidence, he's not fast either. So I think that Borralho does definitely have the striking advantage as well. Borralho's never been finished, and he's a very well-rounded fighter as well. He's got 4 subs, 4 KO TKOs, 7 decisions. He's just a very well-rounded fighter. But when we look at Craig, clearly obvious, he has the submission advantage. He probably has the submission advantage over almost anyone he fights, except for Brendan Allen. He doesn't have the takedown tools to get the fight there. And I think Borralho has a very decent fight IQ, and I don't think he's just going to willy-nilly just jump down and try and submit Paul Craig like Brendan Allen did. I think Borralho is a lot more calculated and likes to fight on the feet, and he's very technically sound on the feet. And Borralho has a very good takedown defense as well anyway. Not to mention, he has amazing momentum at the moment. He's on a 14-fight win streak, whereas when we look at Paul Craig, he's lost 3 in his last 2, getting submitted, and he's been KO TKO'd in there as well. Paul Craig as well, he's getting older, and I just don't think he's going to be able to keep up with that striking, and especially with how accurate Borralho is. He has a 67% striking accuracy, which is just insane. That he's like that having a 67% striking accuracy, you're basically a laser. I mean, you look at how accurate O'Malley is, and O'Malley is borderline just breaching 60%. And this is 67% over career fights, not in UFC fights. This is career-based fights. That's an overall average of 67%. That's just going off how technically sound he is. He uses his jab very well. It's very fast, which is going to cause Paul Craig a lot of problems. Paul Craig doesn't have a lot of head movement as well. When it comes to the actual fight itself, I think it'll be a pretty competitive first round. Paul Craig is still pretty tricky. He's crafty. So I think Borralho will take a bit of time to get his reads in that first. But I think going after that first, once he gets his reads, he'll just pick Paul Craig apart. And then I think in the second round, I think he will almost have him done. And then I think in the third round, he's just going to finish him by TKO. Moving on to Michel Pereira versus Ihor Potieria. Now, this fight was one of my more confident picks. It's pretty safe to say. I mean, you look at Michel, he's coming in with amazing momentum. He's looked top 10 worthy going into the middleweight division. I mean, he looked amazing in welterweight as well. Don't know how the hell he ever made that weight. He's a giant. And he's just a finishing machine. Going off the finishes as well, he's never been finished in the UFC and hasn't lost in 4 years as well. So, I mean, you can clearly see that the momentum is by far on his side in this fight. But when we look at Ihor, I mean, he looked decent against Robert Brychek in his middleweight debut. And he was originally supposed to fight Sharabullah in Abu Dhabi on that fight night with Khamzat Chimaev and Robert Whittaker. But I don't exactly know the reason why, but he scrapped that fight and brought it forward to fighting Michel Pereira. So either he's an idiot or he would have to be in shape for this fight. I mean, you would hope that it is the latter. But, I mean, he's got the reach advantage there over Pereira, and he is a southpaw, and Pereira is an orthodox fighter. So with that reach advantage, he really wants to make sure that he's focusing on winning that lead hand battle. And I don't know how good he is in the kicking department, but he needs to. I think his best option, especially if they are staying in those opposing stances, he needs to utilize liver kicks. To try, realistically, he needs to try and slow down Pereira's movement as best he can. We know Pereira's got a very heavy capoeira style. He utilizes a lot of unorthodox movements, like, casually backflipping on someone's face. He's very, very movement-oriented in his striking style, which is obviously makes him so unorthodox, which is where he gets a lot of his finishes. But when it comes to Ihor, honestly, I just think he's just going to get outclassed in all areas, to be honest. I just don't see where he's going to get that advantage. I honestly think that lead hand fight is a long shot for him, especially because Michel is so movement oriented anyway. It's not just like a normal kind of kickboxing fight. You've got like this guy who's a boxer slash kickboxer against Michel Pereira, who is just an unorthodox capoeira style with a lot of KO power and good submissions. So when we look at Michel, much faster than Ihor, and Ihor is looking chinny. I mean, especially at light heavyweight, he got KO'd in 3 of his last 5, and he only beat Maurizio Shogun who is way past his prime, who was way past his prime when they fought. And in all honesty, I think Pereira just cleans him up in the first round by a KO finish. Moving on to Anthony, You're Attacking My Family Smith versus Vitor Petrino. So we can probably expect this to happen with another Brazilian that's not Johnny Walker. So when we look at Smith, he's obviously the veteran of the two of them. He has 5 times the amount of fights that Petrino has. But in all honesty, I just don't see a scenario where he takes this fight at all. I mean, hence you can see it by the odds. He's a massive underdog, and he's just not fast enough to evade effectively, and he's taken so much damage in his career, especially in recent times when you look at him against, Khalil Roundtree. Oh my goodness. Khalil was about to send him to another dimension if the ref didn't step in on that one. And Petrino is just a bulldozer. You look at him, he looks even too big for the light heavyweight division, just like Pereira was with welterweight. He looks like that with light heavyweight. He's massive. He has a longer reach than Smith as well, and he's got that momentum on his side too. So it's definitely a great opportunity for both, though, I will say. Without a doubt, I mean, Anthony Smith is a dog for taking this fight. This is going to secure either one of them top 10 ranking fights. I mean, as I said in the matchups to make video in the last fight night, honestly would not mind Anthony Smith fighting Bogdan Guskov. I mean, it's just got a lot of hype around it. It gives Anthony Smith a good opportunity to use his submission game, and then Bogdan obviously with that KO power. So I think that does make for a good fight. So I think we can get that one next, no matter if Anthony Smith wins or loses this one. But when it comes, going back to this fight specifically, I think, honestly, I just think Petrino just walks through him in the first round and gets the TKO in round 1. Moving up to the co-main event, Jonathan Martinez versus the King of Rio, Aldo. He's back. Now, this is definitely one of the trickier fights to call. I mean, they are both physically, like based on physical statistics, they are pretty much identical. I mean, they've got the same reach. They're basically the same height. They're very similar in the way they even fight stylistically as well. Martinez does have a little bit more of an output than Aldo, but Aldo has better takedown defense, overall experience, of course. And the funnest part about this fight is both of them have insane leg kicks. Like, leg kicks are just brutal from both of them. Now, I haven't seen a lot of fighters actually realistically use a lot of leg kicks against Jonathan Martinez, except for Saeed Nurmagomedov, which didn't really seem to faze Martinez that much. But when it comes to Jose Aldo, something that he is just as good as his leg kicks as is his checks. He is very good with checking his leg kicks, so it'll be interesting to see if that can compromise Martinez. Now, when we see Martinez with those leg kicks, he destroyed Yanez, and Aldo's obviously been doing it to many opponents throughout his whole entire career. It's just part of his style. And he really implemented that into the MMA world. When we look at Aldo, he's arguably the GOAT of the featherweight division between him and Alexander Volkanovski. And, I mean, he is a veteran, but he is older. He's 37 now. And he hasn't been as active in MMA as Martinez has. He has had 3 boxing fights since he lost to Merab in 2022. A thing that you can take with Aldo is that he obviously has a lot of 5-round experience. However, with him getting older, which was already an issue before, even when he was in his prime, is that he has the knack of fading. He definitely fades in his fights, especially going off his last fight that we have to go off in MMA, which was the Merab fight. Amazing. He stuffed all the I'm pretty sure he stuffed about 16 takedown attempts from Merab. I'm pretty sure it was 100% takedown defense, but he was fading very badly in the third round, and he was backed up against the cage, did not have a whole lot of output. And Jonathan Martinez does love a bit of a clinch game, and he likes to drag fights out, which I think he can definitely do. And Martinez as well has shown no signs of slowing down when he fights. He has very good cardio. Martinez is a little bit of a slow starter though, and I think that Aldo can capitalize on Martinez early, but I think Martinez can capitalize on Aldo late. And I think that with Martinez having that very good chin, I mean, we saw that against Said Nurmagomedov. He put it on him in the first round. He had a lot of spinning kicks, head kicks, spinning elbows, spinning back fists. They were all landing, and he was not getting dropped at all. Basically didn't even get wobbled. Ultimately, when it does come to this fight result, I do think that Martinez will be able to pull through with a bit more, with his cardio. I think he'll be able to put a bit more volume on Aldo throughout that second round, which is that clutch turning round. I think he'll just be able to outland Aldo a bit more. And I think with his cardio, I think Martinez is going to be able to steal this fight 29-28, or possibly get a late finish in the third, depending on how gassed Aldo is. But Aldo is just a veteran, man. He's a GOAT. And I think that if he's going to lose, I doubt he's going to get finished. And I think it'll go to a decision, 29-28 decision. Moving on to the main event, the BTEC King of Rio, Alexandre Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. Now, this fight is probably, honestly, one of the toughest to pick on the whole entire card. I think it's definitely more tough than people think, and I'm not just saying that as a biased Australian. I love Alexandre Pantoja in all honesty, and I do think that Erceg just stands a bloody amazing chance. When you really break down Erceg and what he has actually achieved, and how crisp, concise, and just confident he is in the amount of fights that he's had just at that top level, he's just burst through onto the scene, and he does deserve that. He honestly does deserve the title fight. So definitely, ultimately, it's a closer fight than I think what most people are thinking. Now, when we look at the fight specifically, Pantoja has more than double the experience. It's a very good fight. It'll be a very good fight. Both of them have very high outputs, but Pantoja is extremely crafty. And I think that when it comes to him being crafty, he needs to set up his takedowns like he's never done before. He needs to do it in the safest, most practical way possible. And I think he needs to do it straight away. Because Erceg's best chance of winning this is in the first 2 to 3 rounds of this fight. Because especially with Erceg's power, not necessarily even just his power, I think that Erceg is one of those fighters that doesn't actually have a lot of power. He's just so good with his technique and accuracy that he generates that finish. Like, you look against Matt Schnell, I honestly don't think that shot looked that powerful, but it was just so precise and right on the button at the perfect time. It just flatlined him. Erceg is extremely dangerous on the feet with his boxing, but we got to look at that unknown territory side of things. Erceg has never fought a 4th round in his career, and the further the fight goes, I think the more likely it does go in Pantoja's favor. Now, Pantoja needs to get that control time, or to just make it ugly somehow. He needs to put Erceg on the back foot, and with somehow simultaneously making sure he is safe, but also by being aggressive. Because when we saw Erceg in the Alessandro Costa fight, when Costa was getting very wild and aggressive, Erceg was taking some shots. Urseg's got a chin, but he was taking some shots that were pretty unnecessary, I think. And I think that's just the way that he was dealing with that aggression. I don't think Urseg's usually a fighter that has to deal with a lot of forward pressure. He's usually the one that is it's usually his range that the fight is going by. He's usually the one that is dictating the pace, which I've seen a fair bit on the regional scene. He's usually the one dictating that pace there. But yeah, he needs to be careful if Pantoja is going to get wild and aggressive. He needs to keep that composure and look for that counter strike against Pantoja. Now, we all know, I mean, we've seen especially recently with Pantoja against Brandon Moreno, he's just got that dog in him. He is a beast. I mean, he's one of the fighters with the most heart in the UFC. He will drag it to the depths of hell if he needs to. And I think he can definitely grind out a win if he plays it right with his positioning. But when it comes to Urseg, as I said at the start, what he has achieved in terms of just his actual skill and ability over the years that he's fought, he is much more well-rounded than people think. He's at least a second-degree black belt. The last time I saw, he was a second-degree black belt. And he's an Australian national gold medalist in wrestling as well. We haven't seen a lot of offensive wrestling from Urseg, but I don't think that's something that he wants to utilize in this fight. But we've seen very good defensive wrestling from him. He showed a lot of good sprawls in his fights recently, especially against Alessandro Costa. He's very good at sprawling, good with his takedown defense. So it'll be interesting to see if Pantoja is, again, crafty enough to actually get him down effectively. When you look at it, it could easily go to a decision. Both of them have never been finished, and as I said, both of them do have amazing chins. But I just think it is pretty concerning for Pantoja in that striking department. I think Urseg has been able to find some holes in Pantoja's game. I think that he will find them. And Pantoja, with his style, he has a knack for aggressively throwing his strikes to overwhelm his opponents, to then get the level change for the takedown, to then grind them out. And an issue in that sense is Urseg's technical boxing. He's just he's lengthy. I'm pretty sure he's about 3 inches taller. Yeah, 3 inches taller than him. He's just very precise and very composed in his boxing, and haven't seen him panic in any of his fights. I mean, he's been a little bit bad positionally in terms of that aggressive state, as I said, against Costa, but aside from that, his composure hasn't waned at all. And if he finds his range, especially in that boxing range, that accuracy, I mean, if that's putting Matt Schnell out like that, it's at least going to drop Pantoja badly. I mean, if he's landing like that, have no doubt at all that could drop him. I honestly do believe, you can believe it or not, Australian bias aside, I honestly believe that Urseg will be able to find the mark early, and I think he'll be able to clip Pantoja badly off a counter strike. I think when Pantoja goes in for a barrage of strikes, I think that he will get that counter shot off and then drop him and then get that ground and pound finish in round 2. Moving on to my fight card award predictions. For fight of the night, I have Elvis Brenner versus Miktebek Orolbai. I mean, honestly, this fight can go either way. Brenner's got the power, conditioning, the submission threat as well, and then Orolbai has the durability, the aggressive wrestling, and he's got the power, as well as Brenner. And I think that this fight can honestly end in pretty much any scenario, either one KO TKOing, either one submitting each other, or it going to a decision after a war. And I honestly just think that it's going to be tough to beat this fight for fight of the night. Now for performance of the night, I'm going to go with Maurizio Hufi. I just think that based on his striking style with Malaki's chin's just fading. And I think along with that, Malaki's lack of mobility as well. I just think that Hufi just has that opportunity in front of him to dominate the fight. And I think I'm calling it now. I think he's going to finish him with some form of spinning kick. And I think it's going to be brutal. On to the fighter to watch. I reckon go with Joanderson Brito. I mean, he's got the momentum on his side at the moment. He's strong. I think he plays a pretty harsh game against Jack Shaw's style. And, I mean, if he gets this win in the way that I think he's going to get it, he'll be ready for a top 15 opponent. And it's going to put him on notice. I mean, a top 15 opponent and he's got a 5-fight win streak. I honestly think that he can do some damage in that, at least that top 10 to top 15 range. So it'll be interesting to see him there. Moving up to the underdog of the night, I'm going to go with Astro Boy, Steve Erceg. I think that, well, firstly, out of safety, I probably would have gone with William Gomis. But I do honestly think that Erceg, I think he has a very great chance of getting this one done. For shock of the night, linking on to the underdog, I not only think Erceg can do it, but I think he can give Pantoja his first finish loss, and with it being within 3 rounds. Now on to finish of the night. Got to go with Michel Pereira. I think Ihoy is just a bit too chinny, and Pereira is just too quick and unorthodox, and I think he'll get the most amazing KO finish of the night. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more MMA content, and I'll see you in the next one.